All right, let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the life and teachings associated with Sariputta Thera, one of the really prominent disciples of the Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
We have a fascinating stack of sources here, historical accounts, related teachings. They really paint a picture of his qualities.
That's right. And our mission, for this deep dive is to really pull out the key insights. What specific qualities did Sariputta exemplify, according to these stories? Qualities that maybe surprise us.
Right.
And what do these narratives and the verses the Buddha taught alongside them tell us about, well, fundamental spiritual principles? We'll use these accounts from the source material as our guide here.
Perfect. So let's jump right in with something Sariputta was apparently famous for: immense patience. The sources actually open with people praising this patience.
Yeah, they mention how people noted he just didn't get angry, even if insulted or even physically struck.
Which sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it?
Well, it did to one person. That reputation caught the ear of a skeptic, a Brahmin who just didn't buy it. He figured nobody could have that level of, equanimity.
So he decided to test him.
He did. He decided he had to see for himself, put this monk's legendary patience to the test.
Okay, but how do you test that? I mean, usually you'd maybe say something rude or be annoying. How did he go about it, according to the source?
The source describes it pretty vividly.
Huh.
The Brahmin sees Sariputta out on his alms around, in public.
Okay.
He intentionally goes up behind him and delivers this big, hard blow to Sariputta's back with his hand.
Whoa.
Yeah, this wasn't just a tap. It was meant to provoke, a reaction.
Ouch. That's a pretty extreme test. So what happened? Did Sariputta even flinch? Did he turn around?
The source is quite clear here, and honestly, it's remarkable. It says he didn't look back at all, just kept walking, like absolutely nothing had happened.
Wow. Okay, that's beyond just willpower, isn't it? And the Brahmin, the guy who threw the punch, basically. How did he feel after that?
Well, this is what's truly fascinating, and the source mentions it right away. A burning sensation reportedly just sprang up throughout his entire body, right then and there.
A physical consequence for the aggressor. That adds a whole different layer to the story.
Doesn't it? So this physical discomfort, plus the Sariputta's complete non-reaction, must have been quite a shock for the Brahmin.
I'd imagine so. A rapid change of heart, then.
Absolutely. The source says he ran after Sariputta, fell right down at his feet, and apologized profusely. Admitted he did it specifically to test him.
And Sariputta's response
Yeah.
to the man who just moments before assaulted him.
He forgave him immediately.
Just like that.
Just like that. And not only that, when the Brahmin then invited him to his house for a meal, as a gesture of remorse, Sariputta actually accepted the invitation.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. Because this kind of radical non-reaction, it could be misunderstood, couldn't it? What about the local people who saw it happen? They were the ones praising his patience earlier.
Right. Well, they saw it, and they were furious on Sariputta's behalf. The source says they gathered together, armed with sticks and clods of earth, ready to punish the Brahmin.
Oh, wow.
They were saying they'd kill him right there.
So Sariputta comes out of the Brahmin's house, having accepted his apology and his meal, and there's this angry mob waiting for vengeance. How did he handle that situation?
He just addressed them directly. He asked them, did the Brahmin hit you, or did he hit me?
Clever framing.
Isn't it? And when they confirmed, he hit you, Venerable Sir, Sariputta simply explained that the Brahmin had apologized to him and he had forgiven him.
And told them to go away.
Told him to go away. Completely diffused what could have been a really violent situation. Just incredible presence of mind.
Incredible. But the story doesn't end there, does it? It also says the monks themselves had some concerns about Sariputta's reaction, or lack thereof.
They did, yeah. They actually complained. They were worried that by not retaliating or not allowing the Brahmin to face any consequences, Sariputta was basically giving permission for others to be aggressive.
Ah, okay.
They feared the Brahmin might think, oh, I can just go around hitting people.
So they saw it as enabling bad behavior, perhaps, by not enforcing some kind of justice. How did the Buddha respond to that, well, quite pragmatic concern?
And this is where we get the core teaching connected to this story. The Buddha explained that a true Brahmin, and is using that term here not for social class, but for someone awakened, an arahant simply does not hit another Brahmin. And while, yes, a layperson might strike a monastic, the crucial point is that anger itself is something that's completely eradicated for those who've reached certain stages. Like non-returners, they're free from ill will. and certainly for arahants, the fully awakened ones.
Ah, okay. So the Buddha reframes Sariputta's action or inaction, not as weakness or enabling, but as a sign of his spiritual attainment. And he taught specific verses about this state.
Exactly. He taught verses that really emphasize this internal state. He said, one shouldn't strike an arahant, a Brahmin, in this sense. But then he added something really significant. If an arahant is struck, they should not retaliate. They shouldn't bear any ill will.
Okay.
Striking an arahant is reprehensible, yes, but it's more reprehensible for the arahant to retaliate or harbor ill will back.
More reprehensible for the one not reacting with anger. That seems, well, it seems completely upside down from how we normally think about justice or self-defense.
It does, from a worldly view.
Eh.
But the insight here is pretty profound. The verses highlight that suppressing angry thoughts isn't just like a small effort. For an arahant, cultivating that state where anger doesn't even arise, that's incredibly beneficial. The teaching concludes by saying that as one turns away from a mind intent on harm, suffering ceases from that very cause. So Sariputta's action wasn't about suppressing anger, it was demonstrating the radical absence of it.
Proving the immense patience he was praised for.
Exactly. And illustrating that core principle. Letting go of ill will is the path to ending suffering. It shows this isn't just a story about being nice. It's about a state where anger simply isn't present. That radical inner absence defines the outer action.
Makes sense. It connects his outer conduct to a deep internal transformation.
Precisely. Something the Buddha describes as central to the path.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's transition to another quality that comes through in the sources, revealed in a different story. Sariputta's deep reverence for his teachers. There's an account about his respect for Assaji Thera.
Ah, yes, this is a beautiful story and often cited. The reason for Sariputta's really profound respect was simple. Assaji Thera was the one from whom Sariputta first heard the Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings.
The very first time.
Yes, and by understanding just that single stanza Assaji shared, Sariputta attained stream entry, the first stage of awakening. Assaji was essentially the one who opened his eyes to the path.
That's huge. So how did he show this profound respect? Was it just like saying thank you?
Well, the source describes a specific, ongoing practice he maintained. From the moment he attained stream entry after hearing Assaji's teaching, Sariputta would apparently bow, with folded hands, towards the direction where Assaji Thera was living.
Wherever he was.
Yes. And even when lying down, he would specifically place his head in that direction.
So a constant physical gesture, almost devotional towards his first teacher on the path.
Precisely. However, the sources mention that some other monks saw him doing this and, well, they completely misunderstood what he was doing.
What did they think was going on?
They thought he had incorrect views. They believed he was just worshiping directions like some kind of empty ritual which wasn't seen as a proper practice. So they reported this to the Buddha.
And the Buddha then had to step in and clarify Sariputta's actions.
Yes. The Buddha called Sariputta and asked him about it. Sariputta's response was quite simple. Venerable Sir, whether I worship directions or not, you yourself know. The Buddha then clarified it for the other monks, stated very clearly, because Sariputta is not worshiping directions. Rather, having heard the Dhamma from Assaji Thera, he is worshiping his own teacher.
Validating the action. And he taught a verse in response to this too, didn't he?
He did. The verse taught by the Buddha states that one should respectfully honor the teacher from whom they learned the Dhamma, taught by the Sammasambuddha, the fully enlightened Buddha.
Okay.
And this respect, the verse says, should be shown just as a Brahmin respectfully honors the sacrificial fire, the Agnihotra.
That comparison to the sacrificial fire. For a Brahmin back then, that was the absolute center of their spiritual life, wasn't it? Considered deeply sacred.
Exactly.
So the Buddha is saying respect for the teacher who shows you the path is that important.
That's the implication. The insight here is that the source of the Dhamma for you, the person who illuminates that path, is to be held with a reverence comparable to the most sacred practice of that time. It elevates that spiritual transmission.
It really emphasizes gratitude.
Yes, and that true respect is directed towards the path itself and those who guide us on it. Sariputta's action wasn't some empty ritual. It was a genuine outward expression of that deep inward gratitude for the gift of the Dhamma.
It really underscores that gratitude on this path isn't just a nice feeling. It can be a profound practice, something visible.
It can indeed. And this story shows how deeply Sariputta embodied that.
Let's look at patience again, but maybe from a different angle. this time in a really personal context. There's a story about Sariputta visiting his mother.
Ah, yes, this is a classic one. It highlights a different kind of challenge to patience, absolutely. The source recounts Sariputta, accompanied by 500 monks, going for alms in his mother's village.
His home village. And he went to his mother's house. Must have been quite a reunion.
Well, a reunion, yes. The sources say she had him sit down, served him food. But while she was doing it, she didn't exactly greet him with open arms.
No.
She insulted him. And quite harshly, according to the text.
What kind of things did his own mother say while serving him food?
The insults were pointed. Very personal. She called him an eater of leftovers, or eater of leftover gruel, basically calling him a beggar.
Wow.
She explicitly blamed him for renouncing the family's immense wealth, the source gives a figure, 80 crores.
Huge amount.
Yeah, and said he caused her significant loss. And she didn't stop there. She insulted the 500 monks with him, too. Suggested they'd somehow made her prestigious son their servant, their lackey.
So she's serving him, but just laying into him, blaming him for abandoning the family fortune, accusing his fellow monks. How did Sariputta react to this intense personal barrage from his own mother?
The source is remarkably simple and direct. It just says he simply took his alms food and left for the monastery without saying anything in response.
Silent acceptance and departure. No defense, no attempt to explain.
Nothing. And this story is actually famously punctuated by this little exchange with Rahula, the Buddha's son, who was a young novice then. Rahula asks the Buddha about going to his grandmother's village for alms. The Buddha asked Rahula, well, what did your grandmother say to Sariputta when he visited?
Okay.
Rahula recounts the insults, exactly as we just heard. The Buddha then asks, and what did Sariputta say back? Rahula's reply, straight from the narrative, is simply, nothing, Venerable Sir.
That really underscores it, doesn't it? The complete absence of any verbal reaction.
It does. And the monks, later on, discussing this in the Dhamma hall, they were just astonished at Sariputta's qualities, specifically noting he didn't show even a trace of anger, not even a speck, despite his mother's really severe insults.
And what was the Buddha's teaching when he heard their discussion about Sariputta's non-anger?
The Buddha came and asked what they were talking about. When they told him, he stated that awakened ones, kiyasavas, those whose defilements are ended, are habitually non-angry. Akotana.
Habitually. So it wasn't an effort for Sariputta in that moment.
No, it was just his fundamental nature, because of his spiritual attainment.
And the verse the Buddha taught here connects this back, again, to the definition of a realized person, a Brahmin.
Right. The Buddha taught a verse defining a true Brahmin, someone spiritually accomplished. He calls someone a true Brahmin who is non-angry, who keeps the vows, is virtuous, free from craving, self-controlled, and has their final body, meaning they're an arahant, not subject to rebirth.
So once again, Sariputta's personal conduct, even under extreme provocation from family, is the living illustration. It shows a key characteristic of a highly realized being, the complete absence of anger.
Exactly. It connects directly to that quality highlighted in the verse as central to a true spiritual person, a Brahmin in this higher sense. It shows this non-anger isn't just for public life or strangers. It holds firm even when provoked by those closest to you, which is often the hardest test, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, let's explore one more quality from the sources. A different facet of Sariputta's character is apparent freedom from attachment, from craving. There's a story set after a rains retreat.
Right. Sariputta had been staying with 500 monks in a monastery out in the countryside for the rains retreat period. And the local people, being supportive, had promised lots of provisions for the monks during that time.
Standard practice, yeah. Lay people supporting the Sangha during the retreat.
Yes. But the source says Sariputta left to go see the Buddha right after the formal end of the retreat ceremony, the Pavarnaj.
Okay.
But before all the promised provisions from the villagers had actually been delivered and collected at the monastery.
Ah, so he left before everything promised had actually arrived. What instruction did he give the monks who were staying behind?
His instruction to those monks was quite specific. He told them, when the villagers bring the rest of the provisions, they should collect them all, and then make sure they were sent on to the younger monks and novices.
Send the goods on.
Or, at the very least, send a message to Sariputta about them after they had been collected. Let him know they arrived.
Okay. Collect the donations, make sure the younger monks get them, or at least be informed. Seems responsible enough. But the monks, again, had a misunderstanding about his motivation.
They did. They started discussing it amongst themselves, thinking that because Sariputta was showing this concern about collecting and sending on these provisions, he must still have craving, tanha, attachment. They actually said, perhaps even today, Sariputta Thera still has craving.
They interpreted his concern for the practical needs of the younger monks as personal attachment to material things, maybe indirectly through his disciples.
Precisely that. So the Buddha came and asked what they were discussing. When they told him, he stated directly, quite firmly, "Bhikkhus, my son, Sariputta does not have craving."
Just shut that down immediately.
And he explained why Sariputta gave that instruction. It wasn't for his own benefit, not due to any lingering personal craving at all. He gave the instruction so that the villagers' potential merit from their intended generosity wouldn't be lost by the provisions not being received properly. And also so that the legitimate gain, the actual supplies, for the younger monks and novices wouldn't be lost either. It was concern for the welfare of others and for the whole process of virtuous action, not personal desire for the goods themselves.
That completely reframes it, doesn't it? It wasn't about having the stuff. It was about facilitating the merit of the givers and meeting the legitimate needs of the receivers. And what verse did the Buddha teach here? Connecting this to the Brahmin idea again.
The Buddha taught a verse defining a true Brahmin as someone who has no hopes or cravings in this world or the next.
No hopes or cravings.
And the verse clarifies this means being free from hope, which the sources explicitly equate with craving here, and completely detached from all defilements.
So Sariputta's action, which looked like attachment to the other monks, was actually an expression of non-attachment combined with compassion and wisdom, ensuring the cycle of generosity worked properly for everyone else's benefit.
Exactly. This story and the verse connect his behavior to the complete absence of personal craving, detachment from defilements, another key aspect of the true Brahmin. It shows that freedom from craving isn't about being indifferent to the world or to others' needs.
Right. It's acting out of wisdom and compassion.
Not personal desire.
Yeah.
It shows that profound detachment doesn't mean inaction or a lack of concern for beneficial outcomes for others. It's just acting from a completely different motivation.
Well, this has been a really remarkable deep dive into Sariputta Thera, looking through these specific accounts from the sources. We've explored his immense patience shown both with a stranger's assault and his own mother's insults. We've seen his profound reverence for his teachers expressed years later in that simple, consistent gesture.
Yeah, that physical respect.
And we've examined his freedom from personal craving, where his actions came from concern for others, welfare, and virtuous acts, not any personal attachment.
And woven through all these stories, you see the associated teachings from the Buddha consistently offering this definition of a Brahmin that just bypasses birth or social status completely. It focuses entirely on these internal spiritual qualities.
Right, the verses keep pointing to a true Brahmin being defined by non-anger, by virtue, self-control, freedom from craving, detachment, qualities Sariputta just perfectly embodied in these narratives.
These ancient stories, they aren't just historical anecdotes, are they? They provide these concrete examples of incredibly profound spiritual qualities. They take abstract ideas like radical patience, deep gratitude, true non-attachment, and show them in action.
Makes them relatable, illustrations of the path.
Exactly. It really makes you appreciate the depth of understanding, the realization attributed to disciples like Sariputta.
It does, and what stands out to me, and maybe something for you, the listener, to ponder, is how consistently these sources define a Brahmin, a spiritually accomplished person, by specific inner states. Non-anger, freedom from craving, deep respect for the source of truth, rather than any external identity.
The source material shows us it's not about who your parents are or what group you belong to. It's about cultivating these inner qualities.
So the question becomes, based on this understanding directly from the source material, what does it look like to truly try and embody these qualities in your own life?